I left my dream for my family, a journey of sacrifice and redemption. I grew up in a small town nestled in the rolling hills of rural America. It wasn't the kind of place where big dreams often took root. Most of my peers settled for lives that mirrored their parents, working in the local factories, managing small businesses, or farming the land. But I was different. I had a spark inside me that craved something more, something beyond the confines of my hometown. My dream was to become a software engineer. From the moment I touched my first computer at the age of 10, I was hooked. My parents had saved for months to buy me that old, secondhand desktop, and I'd spent countless hours tinkering with it, pulling apart the hardware and teaching myself to code. By the time I graduated high school, I had built my first app, a rudimentary tool to help local farmers track crop yields. It wasn't groundbreaking, but it was mine. When I got accepted into a prestigious university on a partial scholarship, it felt like all the sacrifices my family and I had made were finally paying off. My mom worked long hours as a nurse, and my dad ran a small diner that barely broke even most months. They were my biggest cheerleaders, and when I left for college, their pride was almost palpable. But life, as I'd soon learn, doesn't always follow the trajectory of our dreams. My first year of university was a whirlwind of new experiences. I threw myself into my studies, joined coding clubs, and even landed an internship with a startup. My professors were supportive, and my peers inspired me to push my limits. For the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged to a community that shared my passion. Back home, things were different. The pandemic hit my dad's diner hard. Customers dwindled and bills piled up. My mom started picking up double shifts at the hospital, and my younger siblings, Jake and Emily, were struggling with online school. My parents didn't tell me how bad things were, but I could hear it in their voices during our weekly calls. My dad's usually jovial tone had been replaced by a weary resignation, and my mom's laughter seemed forced. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of classes and work, I received a call from Jake. He was only 13, but the weight in his voice made him sound so much older. "Hey, Mia," he began hesitantly. "What's up, buddy?" I replied, trying to sound cheerful. "I need some help with my math homework," he said, but I could tell there was more. "Sure thing," I said. "Let's hear it." As we worked through the equations, he finally admitted the real reason for his call. The school was organizing a field trip, and he didn't want to ask Dad for the $50 fee. "He's already so stressed," Jake said quietly. That night, I couldn't sleep. My family was struggling, and here I was, living in a dorm, chasing a dream that suddenly felt selfish. I'd always believed that my education would be the key to lifting my family out of hardship. But what good was a future promise when they needed help now? The next morning, I made the hardest decision of my life. I walked into the registrar's office and withdrew from all my classes. My heart felt like it was breaking, but I knew it was the right thing to do. When I called my parents to tell them, my mom cried. "Mia, you don't have to do this," she said. "Mom, it's okay," I assured her. "This is what family does." I packed up my dorm room and returned home that weekend. The house felt smaller than I remembered, and the air was heavy with unspoken worries. My dad tried to put on a brave face, but I could see the relief in his eyes when I handed him my first paycheck from my new job as a grocery store cashier. Life back home was a stark contrast to my days at university. My mornings started early, helping my siblings with their schoolwork before my shift at the store. Evenings were spent at the diner, where I'd taken over the bookkeeping to help my dad. The work was exhausting, but it was also grounding. For the first time in years, I felt deeply connected to my family. Despite the challenges, there were moments of joy. Jake's face lit up when I surprised him by covering the cost of his field trip. Emily, who was just 10, started baking cookies for the diner to sell, and her creations quickly became a hit with the customers. My dad's smile slowly returned, and my mom, though still tired, seemed less burdened. But there were also moments of doubt. Late at night, when the house was quiet, I'd pull out my laptop and stare at the lines of code I'd written months ago. I missed the thrill of solving complex problems, the camaraderie of my classmates, and the feeling of working towards something bigger than myself. 2 years passed in this rhythm of sacrifice and resilience. Slowly but surely, my family's situation improved. My dad reopened the diner on a smaller scale, focusing on takeout and catering. My mom cut back on her shifts, and Jake and Emily thrived in school. One day, while scrolling through my emails, I saw a message from one of my old professors. He'd heard about my situation and wanted to recommend me for a remote coding internship with a nonprofit. The role was part-time, flexible, and paid just enough to cover my own expenses. "You have too much talent to let it go to waste," he wrote. Tears streamed down my face as I read his words. It felt like a lifeline, a chance to reconnect with my passion without abandoning my responsibilities. I accepted the offer and started the following week. Balancing the internship with my other commitments wasn't easy, but I'd learned how to juggle challenges over the past 2 years. The work reignited my love for coding, and for the first time in a long while, I felt hope. Now, as I sit here writing this, I'm back in school. Online this time. I'm finishing my degree at my own pace with the support of my family and the experience of those 2 transformative years. My journey didn't follow the path I'd envisioned, but it led me to a deeper understanding of what truly matters. Dreams are important, but so is family. And sometimes the greatest act of courage is putting others before yourself. I may have left university, but I never stopped learning. And in the process, I discovered that sacrifice, love, and resilience are the most valuable lessons of all.